Thanks for checking out this movie review video, and this is for the 2006 film Hatchet, and this review is for your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, because since I'm doing this in October, I am taking all viewer-submitted requests. So I already have them set, people already submitted them, and this is the first one I'm going to kick it off with. Also, if you don't know your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, just literally search your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and you will find his channel. He does some really awesome content having to do with evaluating kills in horror films, which I think he should do the Hatchet films. Just saying. If he wanted me to review Hatchet, he should also give it the treatment that he does with his nails in the coffin. Anyway, I'm going to say up front, I'm not the biggest fan of this film. I had only seen it once prior to rewatching it again for this review, and I didn't really like it that much the first time I watched it. I walked away from it feeling pretty underwhelmed, and to be honest, I kind of felt a bit the same way. I think I probably appreciated it a little bit more now because of the practical effects. This film kind of showed up during a time period where a lot of horror was kind of moving more towards using things like CGI, so this was a welcome installment in the slasher pantheon, because it was going hard on practical effects. Adam Green, who was the writer-director, made a rule that they were only doing practical effects. They wanted everything to be very realistic looking. And I think that's why the film actually shines. The kills are what the film is all about. And I think that was kind of the point. It was also just to kind of pay homage to the old school slashers of the 80s and a little bit of the 70s, and just kind of say, maybe by doing this, we can kind of start something up again. And I think it may have been important in doing that, because I think some other people have kind of taken that as a sign to kind of start doing some of the similar stuff. And maybe it started a rise in, more practical effects for slasher films or horror films in general, but can't know for sure. Again, written and directed by Adam Green, who did Holliston, which is a very fun horror-related show. Digging Up the Marrow, Frozen, Hatchet 2, Hatchet 3, and Victor Crowley, which I actually own Hatchet 2 and Hatchet 3 because I got them in some mystery box before, but I don't own the first one or Victor Crowley. I do remember liking Victor Crowley. I don't think I've seen 2 or 3, but maybe I should take care of that at some point. The cast includes Kane Hodder as Victor Crowley, who, let's just say, he does an amazing job. Kane Hodder, always known for doing a wonderful job, obviously best known for being Jason Voorhees, the best physical acting Jason Voorhees, and he brings that to the character of Victor Crowley. So, he does probably the best job. No, not probably. He definitely does the best job in this film acting-wise, especially because he can't deliver lines. He's really not supposed to. All he can do is just kind of make noises. So it's all physical movements, and that's actually not easy to do, but he is the master at that stuff. Also, kudos to him for doing a stunt where he's actually on fire in this, because he had been burned doing a fire stunt some years prior. I don't remember exactly when it was, and he faced his fears, and he did it for this film, and I think some other films too. Man, that takes a lot. So Kane Hodder, obviously, Robert Englund shows up in this in the beginning. He's one of the first 2 people to die in the film, and then Tony Todd shows up briefly as the guy who has quit doing these midnight swamp tours, haunted swamp tours in Louisiana, which is where it takes place. Joel David Moore is your typical down on his luck looking for love nerd. He actually plays that character very well. He's kind of been cast as that character a lot in life. I don't really know what he's doing nowadays, but hopefully he was able to kind of break free of that stereotyping character-wise, but he did a good job with it. He was probably the second best acting in this film, as far as a more substantial character goes, because obviously, Robert Englund and Tony Todd. Anyway, Green actually sought to do all practical effects and only use CGI to remove wires and camera setups, which I kind of already touched on. But yes, there is a little bit of CGI. Also, I do believe the intro is CGI to this, where it's going through the water and through the sewers and all that jazz to get to New Orleans to, show that it's a party vibe to start. Excuse me. And speaking of Louisiana, this was actually the last film to shoot in Louisiana before Hurricane Katrina hit. And we all know what a real life horror that was. So that's a very interesting fact that they were the last ones to get that in. I mean, can you imagine if they had been working on the film and Hurricane Katrina happened while they were in production? I can't imagine how terrible that would have been. I mean, obviously Hurricane Katrina was terrible, but for making a film and it interrupts making a film, like, you kind of have to like start over, find a new location. Well, probably not start over, but find a new location, really. The ringtone of Misty's phone in this film is I Don't Want to Wait by Paula Cole. Do you get it? I don't want to wait for our lives to be over. The Dawson's Creek theme song, which I was forced to watch Dawson's Creek when I was younger. It's a whole thing, but I think using that song is pretty funny, which is one of the things that's kind of sought to do in this film a lot, is trying to, throw humor into it and not make it a straight up horror film. Make it really a horror comedy. Now, that said, I personally did not find that the horror or that the comedy was hitting very well. There were a few things I actually laughed at, and I'll probably comment on most of those in my notes. I think I do. But, excuse me, for the most part, not really a fan of the comedy. I think it's more of a, like, comedy of its time. There were a lot of films at this point that were using this type of comedy, and I think that there's some things that are said comedy-wise in the film that Green probably would not do nowadays if he was making the film. So, just saying. The intro portion of the film goes on too long and seems to be more concerned with trying to be funny, but kind of actually failing at that. Like I said, I did not like the humor for the most part. It wasn't very funny. Maybe that's because I'm older now. Maybe it's because it was the time period. But like I said, like, there was a lot of this type of humor in film at that time. So, like, I get it. It's a dated film in that sense. Practical effects-wise, definitely not dated, though. It is awesome. The gore at the end of the scene in the beginning is actually great, though. So that kind of makes up for, like, how long and drawn out that beginning is. Like, you start, or at least I started to kind of lose interest in it because I was like, this is going on too long, and it seems like they're just stretching it out to try and fit in more jokes. And I don't really think the jokes are doing anything. So let's, like, get to something, I'm more used to and like better the kind of, like, quick setups with, like, a hook to it. Obviously, there is a hook to it at the end of it, but it just kind of took too long. But it's a great hook. Like, all the blood and guts going everywhere, so it really sets up the expectation, like, you know what you're getting into with the blood and guts. The Marilyn Manson song and Mardi Gras scenes set the party vibe for what Green has in mind for the film. I also think the line in it, "This is the new shit," which is from the Marilyn Manson song, is meant to be a statement that this is the new wave of slasher kind of reclaiming this old style. In a way, taking it back to its old style, but trying to, like, start something new and say, like, this is what's going to be new with slashers. Like, let's do this. Let's get away from, like, CGI and all this stuff. Let's go back to the roots and let's do some awesome big kills, over-the-top gore practical effects. Because obviously within this film it looks amazing. Like, if you were looking for great practical effects and really cool kills, like, that's what this film is. Like, that's what it's for, basically. Other than that, unfortunately, I don't think there's much to it. The character of Ben is obviously the more intellectual and sensitive person who isn't just satisfied with mindless partying, kind of fitting into what I was saying that Moore had been typecasted as. The misdirect on Reverend Zombie, who was Tony Todd's character, his story about why he doesn't do Night Swamp tours anymore, I actually did find pretty funny. How he was kind of setting it up like he took some people out, and, like, you're thinking maybe it was going to be like, and Victor Crowley got him, and it actually ends up being like someone kind of injured themselves and they tried to sue him, and he's just like, that's why I don't do it anymore. But if you own a company, that's probably more of a horror story than the Victor Crowley route. But I did like that, how they kind of, like, it was a misdirect. The Girls Gone Wild guy, Shapiro, and his ladies immediately seem like prime targets to get it first when the killings actually pick up again. I don't remember if they were, like, the first, because the kills start, when they start going, like, they start, like, really going, but actually I think they were. And it's going back to that whole thing, if, like, people are problematic, if they do bad things, like, they're in big trouble, they're gonna die. Like, it's taking it back to the old school slashers, like people doing drugs, people lying, people trying to con people, like Shapiro was, or the guy, driving the boat, doing the tour. Like, yeah, you know who's going to get it, basically. Although they have that kind of twist in the end where you think, oh no, the good people who are supposed to survive are maybe not going to make it, but that's where Hatchet 2 would pick up. Because I believe that if you watch all three of the original Hatchets, that it takes place, like, if you just watch them, like, back to back, it takes place over just, like, a few days. Jack Cracker, the character of Jack Cracker, the older gentleman in the boat trying to yell at them, giving them a warning, is supposed to be the harbinger of old school slashers. The old guy trying to give the warning, he even says, "You're all gonna die." But, the motor of the boat is kind of covering that up. I do like the touch that he actually does end up drinking his own piss, because that's what the character of Sean says. He's like, oh, he's this crazy old guy, he drinks his own piss. And then later, after he's like, oh, you're all gonna die, tried to warn you, then he just, like, takes a swig of, like, one of those, I forget what they're called, but they're, like, portable little containers to pee in when you're out somewhere. So, yeah, I thought that was funny. Sean intentionally trying to not listen to Jack Cracker gives you the idea that he doesn't know what he's doing, and he would create some very unsafe situations, which is exactly what ends up happening. And then you eventually obviously find out that he only did this one other time. But hey, the people were fine the other time. I guess Victor Crowley wasn't out on the prowl that night. And I think he even said it was like the night prior, so he was somewhere. You just get a piece of the Crowley story from Sean, but Mary Beth lets you know there's more to it by a few little things that she says, and then obviously much later she elaborates upon it. And I actually think that other than the practical effects, the kills, and the copious amounts of gore, the other great thing about it is that kind of backstory to Victor Crowley. I think it is an effective backstory. I think the character of Victor Crowley is a cool, somewhat iconic type character that I think the creation of was pretty smart. Like, obviously it's very derivative of Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, but they're trying to pay homage anyway. It's different enough, and it feels iconic in its own right, in my opinion. So the two things I love most from the film: the kills, the gore, the practical effects, and the backstory on Victor Crowley and how they pull that off, and Kane Hodder's acting. Once the boat gets stuck, they pile on the reasons that they won't be leaving anytime soon, and the audience knows there's more than gators out there. They have the gator pushing them out of the water, they have the rain that started, they have people saying, oh, you're not going to be able to get anyone out here to help us. Like, they just keep throwing things out about how isolated they are and how they're there for the long haul. And at this point, obviously, they don't know that Victor Crowley is out there on the prowl, but the audience knows because you saw him, because you saw that intro in the beginning of the film. So the tension for the audience members is relatively high at this point. The tension for the characters, kind of high because they don't want to be stuck, but not as high as it should be because they don't know they're being stalked yet. The alligators serve to push the characters on land and into Crowley's territory, yes. Mary Beth revealing her connection to the opening victims adds some extra intrigue to the film. It also lets you know that she's the one who's most prepared for what's going to be happening. It gives you the idea that she would probably be the survivor of anyone. Also, the character of Ben, just because of the fact that, he's the character that the film starts with. He's the nice guy. He's the different guy who's more sensitive and in touch with his feelings and all that type of stuff. So those would be the people to make it, and they do make it to the end. But then, like I said, there is that twist to it where they're kind of like, yes, but did they make it? And they leave it on that nice cliffhanger of, now you got to see the next film, which was smart. The full Victor Crowley backstory is effective, and you feel for Crowley, which is just like Jason Voorhees as well. That's an important thing, too. Like, you need that moment where, like, it's this tragic beginning, and then that helps create this kind of iconic level, because they haven't just always been bad. They're, relatable to some degree, which makes them more human, which helps with making them more iconic, I think. What are the odds that they're standing right in front of the old Crowley house? At that moment, we're just like, that wasn't the house, that's the one. And she literally points and they're like standing in front of it. And I was just like, yeah, what are the odds? It's the convenience of filmmaking. It's just like, because it would be boring if they're still like walking around a lot longer. So I get it. Jim getting diagonally hacked is a long sequence for something like that, and it's great. I love that that's a long sequence because you get all the grisly details. It's so good. Then quickly followed by Shannon's top half of her head being ripped off with her tongue flapping around. That is my favorite kill. That's my favorite practical effect. That's my favorite kill, where he grabs her mouth and just like rips the top of her head off, and her tongue is like flapping around. Like, that extra touch of the tongue takes it to that next level. Like, the ripping was good enough, and then the tongue flapping is just like this thing where it's kind of funny, but it's also like, okay, you know, maybe that actually would be happening, and it's gross too. So I love that that's in there. Shapiro's head twist was okay. I mean, plenty of blood thrown there, but it wasn't that great of a kill. I like how everyone stops to bicker and talk about their secrets when there's a homicidal maniac after them. Just goes to show characters aren't that smart in slasher films, and they weren't, because this film's kind of paying homage to that. I give it a pass on the characters being stupid and kind of doing stupid things, because it's supposed to be hearkening back to those types of films, and that's what happened in those films. The misdirect of the raccoon in the bushes, where they were just hearing this noise and they didn't know what it was, and they focused on it for quite a while. It works because you become so focused on finding out what's in the bush that you don't expect the jump scare of Crowley coming out of the woods from the opposite side. So that was a good jump scare. It didn't really like get me. It didn't like make me jump, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was effective. I didn't think it was stupid and too kitschy, so I did like that setup. Sean's shovel death. That's a good shovel death. Well, it's a good death in general. One of the best shovel deaths I've seen, to be honest. I do like that, how he kind of takes his head off with the shovel. Once Ben takes charge with the idea to fight back, that's the moment he changes in the eyes of the others, because he becomes more respected. Prior to that, people were kind of brushing him off, just being like, who does this guy think he is? Not taking him seriously, like, this dude's a nerd, he's probably never had sex, you know, those types of things. And then once he starts taking charge and being like, someone needs to come up with a plan, someone needs to take charge, and then Mary Beth ends up collaborating with him basically on that, like, those two kind of take the respect, and everyone starts kind of looking at them as like, okay, fine, we don't know what to do, so like, you are the leaders now. So yeah, that's when things really change for the character of Ben. The scene of Crowley being lit on fire looks good, and you can tell it's real. You know, obviously not CGI, especially not 2006 CGI, which I don't even want to know what that scene would have looked like done in CGI. I'm sure it would have been horrendous. As soon as the rain starts, you know that Crowley's coming back to try and finish things. And they even make a comment. They're kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, something to that effect of like, he's going to be put out by this. It may not kill him. They had a great plan. It worked up to this point. But no, Mother Nature or fate or, you know, whatever divine entity or whatever says, oh, no. Crowley gets another go. And he does. I am sure everyone assumed that would be the case. I do like Marcus's arms being ripped off. That was another cool death. Like I was saying, for the most part, these deaths are really good. They look really good, and that was another good one. I don't think that Crowley seemed dumb enough to run right into that iron bar. I will say that much. That's one of the things about this film that really bothers me, is Crowley seems to have a lot of prowess for tracking down people, going after them, killing them. The fact that he just like runs straight forward and into this bar that Ben has bent that was sticking into his foot just does not make sense. Like, I feel like it was kind of lazy. I think they could have come up with something better. And it wasn't even that cool or effective, to be honest. They should have come up with something else. That's one of the things that bothers me most about that. Mary Beth getting grabbed out of the boat. Very Friday the 13th. Obviously, there's so many nods to Friday the 13th in particular, especially with, you know, Victor Crowley being a very Jason Voorhees type character. I did like that they leaned into it so much further with that boat scene and her being grabbed, just like the end of the first film. Really enjoyed that. I do like that they end on a very dark note for Ben and Mary Beth. Obviously very much in danger, potentially going to die, because I think she finally gets out from being underwater and she sees that Ben is like pretty messed up in the boat. So you really don't know, like, will he make it through this? Will he not make it through this? And is she going to get pulled back under and drown? We don't know. So like I said, it's a very effective setup to go see the second film. And I like dark endings like that too. So kudos on that one. The character interactions in this, I do have to say, are overwhelmingly cringy and boring, unfortunately for me. The characters suck for the most part. Other than Victor Crowley, I think the characters are terrible stock. I mean, obviously that's part of, the whole idea with, being an homage to like old school slashers, because that's kind of how they were, but you got more interesting characters back then, like think about something like Black Christmas, like way more interesting characters, and the interactions felt like realistic and interesting, unlike in this film where the dialogue is really like cheesy, crappy, and the relationships don't feel that great, that real or great, and their interactions are just, like I said, cringy and boring. Like anytime that any character was interacting with each other, I was just bored. So that's why I don't love this film, but there are enough good things with it. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to say a very solid 3-star rating. I got to bump it up because, it's shot well, good use of music, Kane Hodder did an amazing job, good backstory on Victor Crowley. Obviously, the practical effects and the kills are really cool, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. But now's the time for your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete to let you guys know about how he feels about it in his own video. So I'm going to challenge him to do his own video. I know he's, at this point when I'm making this video, he's doing all the Halloween films, so maybe after that you consider doing Hatchet. I think they're all on Tubi at the moment, but anyway, go ahead and put your thoughts about the film down in there down there in the comments. That'd be great. Also, do me a favor and hit subscribe to my channel. Also, hit subscribe to your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel. He's awesome. Hit the notification bell buttons, then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing a good amount at this point. And I'm going to be continuing in October with the viewer-submitted suggestions all the way through the month of October. So I'll be saying in each one who it's, for, whose suggestion it was. So it's not, these aren't picked by me. They're picked by these individuals. Hopefully people end up liking them. And especially the people who, made the suggestion. I hope I do it justice for these. Uncle Pete might be a little bit disappointed that I don't love Hatchet more, but it is what it is. Thanks everyone for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.